Hello, and welcome into the 60 Feet 6 Inches LSU Pod. Thank you for joining me. In this episode, we'll be going over the weekend series for the LSU baseball team as they took on the visiting Ole Miss Rebels at Alex Box Stadium. I will give you what the three big things were from this series. How did I do on the Get Right, Stay Right list? And then finally, what lies ahead this week for your Tigers.
Now Warren Morris hits a deep drive down the right field line. That ball is gone! LSU wins the College World Series on a home run by Morris.
So thank you for tuning in. If you're listening in on audio for the first time, the 60 Feet 6 Inches LSU Pod is available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and other audio platforms. If you are viewing this on the 60 Feet 6 Inches LSU Pod YouTube channel, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, comment, and hit that notifications bell as well. And on Twitter, the account is at 60FT, 6IN LSU Pod. Make sure to follow the Twitter account, set your notifications, and interact with me as well. I want to thank, as always, everybody for the likes, retweets, comments, and interaction during and after the games and after the preview and review series pod. It is very much appreciated. Okay, guys, let's get into this. Not a good weekend at all for the LSU baseball program as they get swept at home by the Ole Miss Rebels. That is the first time Ole Miss has ever swept LSU in Baton Rouge. They lost Friday/Saturday morning, 5-3 in the rain-suspended game. They lost 11-1 on Saturday, which I was there for, and then they fell 8-5 on Sunday. That puts LSU at 33-18 on the year. They are 14-13 in conference play, which currently puts them in the fourth place in the SEC West behind A&M is above Arkansas now. So A&M, Arkansas with the tiebreaker, then Auburn, then LSU. Currently, the RPI took a huge hit for LSU this weekend. LSU's RPI sits at 37. They dropped 20 spots over the weekend, which is tough to stomach if you're an LSU fan. But a small silver lining is that Vandy took the series from Arkansas, and they currently have an RPI of 3. And as we all know, LSU's last SEC series of the weekend is Thursday, Friday, Saturday in Nashville versus Vanderbilt. So a chance to make up a lot of ground in that RPI if they go up there and take care of business. So let's get right into it. Let's just get into the ugliness of the weekend for LSU. Friday night, the game started. They played 3 innings before the rain and the lightning came, and that game got suspended, and they pushed it to an 11 o'clock Saturday a.m. start time with Game 2 to follow 50 minutes later. LSU loses. I'm just going to refer to it as the Friday night game. LSU loses the Friday night game 5-3. And as we discussed on the preview pod, this is going to be a very good pitching matchup with LSU having Hilliard going versus Ole Miss and their ace, Dylan DeLucia, as going, and he'd been throwing very well as of late. And it looked early on, before the rains came, that pitching matchup was going to live up to its billing. You know, LSU starts off fast with a 2-run home run from Cruz in the first, and Hilliard's doing okay, but 1 inning later in the top of the second, everything changed for LSU. He gets 2 outs, then all of a sudden he gets a bloop double from McCants, and then he goes strike 1, strike 2. Then he throws strike 3, which is a nasty curveball. McManus cannot come up with the block. The ball rolls all the way to the backstop, allowing the left-handed hitter to advance to first. So you're looking at first and third with 2 outs. And I don't want to be too reactionary and blow this out of proportion, but it felt like, one, the inning change right there. And if you could look back, you wonder, did the series change in that instant? And that might be a little far-fetched, but you could feel something happen. But LSU still had a chance, and Hilliard still had a chance to get out of this inning with no damage done. You got first and third, you got 2 outs. He goes 3-2 walk, and then he goes 2-out single up the middle, drives in 2 runs, another 3-2 walk, then another 2-out single, drives in 2 runs, and before you know it, LSU's down 4-2. The problem I have with that inning, and we've seen it lately, is that pitching coach Jason Kelly falls in love with the curveball. And I thought Chris Burke, who was on the SEC broadcast, did a great job. And he even noticed it, but I counted about 10 curveballs in a row. And to me, that's been the problem with Hilliard the last 2 outings. And in this outing, you've seen him struggle, and he's been able to work himself out of some trouble lately, but whether or not he has the ability to shake, or whether or not, and if he does he not choose to shake, but he just falls in love with the curveball, and he really has a hard time putting hitters away. I mean, the curveball is very good, but if you're a hitter and you've seen it 4 times in one at bat, and you know it's coming again, eventually if he hangs it or he bounces it, you have the ability to hit it or lay off of it. And if it's 3-2 and you've seen it 5 previous pitches and maybe you've even fouled one off, and you know you're just going to sit on it, that makes it harder for him to get people out. And here's another thing too. When you don't throw fastballs and you don't trust your fastball, it's tough to control it. So when he does throw it and he misses it in the zone, either him or the pitching coach just says, "Oh, screw it. We're just going to ditch the fastball and stick with the curveball." So it's just kind of like a vicious cycle, right? You don't throw any fastballs. When you didn't throw it, you miss. So you kind of reinforce what you already thought was the problem. It's like, "Oh, we're just going to go back to the curveball." And if you're a starter, you can't command your fastball, and you throw a curveball 60 or some type of breaking ball 60 to 7% of the time, and scouting reports are out there, I just think that's a huge problem moving forward. And I have no idea why the pitching coach just seems to fall in love with it. And it's just an extreme. It's just all the way on that side of the spectrum for me. And I have no insight, but I just think that's a problem moving forward. You have to be able to show a fastball for a strike. And even if you're not going to get people out with it, you have to show it. You have to show it in at bat or throughout your outing. But if you're 70% breaking balls, to me that's just, and you're a starter, that's just not a long-term recipe for success. I just can't see that really turning around. Now that the book is out on Hilliard and people know what to expect, you can almost just say, look, just sit on a breaking ball, because even if he throws 2 fastballs for a strike, you're going to get a breaking ball at some point, and multiple ones at that. I don't know. I just question that a lot of times with his starts lately. So the games get suspended. LSU's down 4-2. And Bianco rolls the dice, right? And he brings DeLucia back out on Saturday morning. And to me, I thought he was taking a chance, but DeLucia comes out and absolutely deals. And he finds his mojo, and LSU had no answer for him, and they really had no real threat. The game's 4-2. Ty Floyd starts for LSU. LSU scratches a run late in the game with Thompson solo home run. LSU only had 3 hits in the game overall in the Friday/Saturday game. And 2 of those hits were home runs from Cruz and Thompson. And LSU had no answer for DeLucia. They didn't do anything when they came back out on Saturday morning. There was no fight. There was no adjustments made. And he just basically shoved. And he dealt. And he was everything that a lot of people thought he was going to be. And he made it very tough for LSU to get anything going. The only bright spot for me on the Friday/Saturday game was Ty Floyd. So Ty Floyd started the game for LSU on Saturday. And I thought he threw great. He went 6 innings pitched, 2 hits, and only 1 run allowed. And I thought it was huge. He showed the coaching staff he can pitch in the SEC. I would pencil him in as a Game 2 starter, but I don't get paid the big bucks to make that decision. And I thought he was very impressive. And once again, that's back-to-back outings in the SEC where he's shown that he can get people out, building off the outing he had at Alabama. And maybe he's your answer as the Game 2 starter. And that's what I would do moving forward. And he's shown that he can go deep. I mean, he just gave you 6 against a good Ole Miss team who battered LSU's pitching all week. And for him to only give up 2 hits in that spot, that was massive. So he really matched DeLucia, gave LSU a chance to come back, but nothing was going for LSU we're just going to call it the Friday night game, as they lose 5-3. And we're just hoping Mikhail Hilliard is able to find that mojo moving forward, because he's absolutely key to LSU's success in the Vandy series and in the SEC tournament and whatever regional spot they land in moving forward. So moving on to game 2 of Saturday, I was at this game, and it was ugly from the get-go. LSU gets hammered 11-1. And, the park to me was pretty dead. It was a weird situation because the game had to get moved up. You didn't know when it was going to start. And you just felt like after the 3rd or 4th inning that there was no way LSU was going to come back. They struggled versus the freshman left-handed pitcher for Ole Miss, Hunter Elliott. And he had a very good line score, but I thought he gave LSU chances throughout the game to get back in it. He was, as my buddy Doug Thompson referred to it on the radio, he was effectively wild, to where he would give LSU shots during at-bats or during innings to kind of break things open, but they just never could put it together. And lo and behold, I think he went like 7 innings, 9 Ks. So he just followed up his good outing with at Missouri against a dominant outing against LSU. And when you look at the stats, LSU offered 0 at the plate. It had 5 hits, and 2 guys had 5 hits. Dugas and Morgan. They had 3 hits and 2 hits between them. And to me, they didn't grab the momentum early in that game. And once Ole Miss started piling on, LSU just kind of said, screw it, we're done. It was just disappointing. Disappointing to see that at the park and to feel that throughout the atmosphere as I walked around the stadium. And Ole Miss just kept swinging the sticks. They never let up. They just kept pounding LSU's pitchers. And it just kind of started right off the bat, right? So Fontenot gets the start. To me, that was an interesting choice. I thought it may be money. Or who knows? But Fontenot gets the start, and he gets 2 cookouts, and just like that, boom, he gives up a solo home run to right and then another solo home to right. Elko smokes a line drive in the 3-hole, and then I think Graham comes up and belts one to right center. And just like that, LSU's down 2-0. Cooper comes in for Fontenot in the second and gives up a home run as well. Taylor comes in, and then Money comes in the 5th. And at this point, it's really not out of reach yet. It's 5-0, which sounds terrible, but it's not out of reach because, like I said, Elliott's he shows you signs where he can get really wild and walk 1 or 2 guys, and then he kind of works his way out of it. So he's just kind of on that tightrope right there. 5-0. Money comes in to face Elko, and you figure this is going to go one way or the other, right, good or bad. And lo and behold, Money makes a great pitch to get Elko to ground the ball up to Doty. And LSU's defense just rears its ugly head. I mean, it's just a tailor-made 4-6-3 double play to get LSU out of the inning, but the ball rolls through Doty's legs, a collective groan throughout Alex Box Stadium. He boots it, and all of a sudden, the Tigers are in trouble. They score a couple more runs, and I'm not going to go through the rest of the game. But you felt in the park at that time that it was pretty much done at that point. And they go on to lose 11-1. So I'm not going to rehash that. They had a ton of relievers come in after that. Money does end up going 3 innings that game. And you just felt like at that point they'd already lost the series, but what were they going to show on Sunday? If they could win the Sunday game and kind of salvage the series, then everything's not lost per se. And I had some DMs with another baseball guy here in town. And I told him, like, look, when I woke up on Saturday, I knew I was going to the game on Saturday, game 2. But I felt like if they could somehow turn game 1 around, figure out a way to get DeLucia out of the game, and then grab the momentum in game 2, it would just be huge for this team. But when I woke up Saturday, I didn't feel good about anything. I really felt like, and I was like, well, maybe I'm overreacting. I felt, not that LSU's season was on the line, but I felt like if they lost game 1, they were probably going to lose game 2. So they were going to lose a series, and that was just going to turn things a little ugly for the weekend. So Sunday, I liked the matchup, as I talked about in the preview pod, versus Diamond. He had like a 6 or 7 ERA coming in. The SEC had really battered him around this year with his high ERA and his high batting average against, and I really thought the LSU bats were going to come alive. And I figured Dutton was going to start. I guess you can call Dutton that outing a start. I know I said last week I was going to trust Jay Johnson, and I continue to trust him. I think he's the right man for the job, but it's just a weird situation, right? And I felt like this game was a must-win for LSU. And while that may be an overreaction or kind of a prisoner of the moment situation, I just know what lies ahead and felt like LSU really needed to get back on track and get this game on Sunday. But then right off the bat, Dutton's first pitch of the game gets smoked for a double in the left center field gap. Dugas runs into the fence. Subsequently, he gets hurt and gets pulled out of the game. He doesn't even record an at-bat on the day as Stevenson comes in for him. But Dutton throws one pitch and gets pulled. And I've never seen that from a starter. And I've seen it from relievers, and that's happened to me. I've thrown one pitch, given up a bomb, and gotten pulled. But it was just so odd. And I thought Ronnie Rance did a great job of explaining to everybody who was not at the park that obviously Hasty was in the pen and he was ready to roll. And I've seen subsequent comments by Jay Johnson saying that it was a matchup thing with Ole Miss starting 5 lefties, I believe. So why not just start Hasty? So you're going to tell me, what happens if Dutton gets benched, the first hitter out? Then are you going to bring Hasty in no matter what to face Gonzalez? Then you got Elko, and then Graham's a lefty. I don't know. If he's going to if you're like, no matter what, if he gets him out or he gets a hit or gets a walk, that he's coming out, then just let Hasty start the game. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there, but that's the way he chose to play it. So Hasty comes right into the game. And Dutton obviously wasn't very happy. I don't know if you saw his body. For those of you who didn't see his body language, as soon as Jay Johnson made the mound visit, he's shaking his head and he's pissed, and I can't blame him. Anybody who's a competitor who wants to stay in that game, I mean, hell, you only threw one pitch. You didn't have a chance to get comfortable. So Hasty comes in relief of Dutton. I guess he's a relief. I don't know. He comes in, gives up a run, then he gives up 2 more in the second. But then after that, he did well, I thought. I thought he held Ole Miss at bay and allowed LSU to get back into the game. He left after 4 complete with the score tied 4-4. LSU fights his way back against Diamond. They get a 2-run bomb from Pearson. Morgan hits a solo shot, to tie the score up. And I believe it's 3-3 at that point. And then Raiselman comes in and he just gets hit hard. He comes in the 5th and he gives up 2 2-run bombs to make it 7-3 Ole Miss. And as an LSU fan, you're like, God, we just can't catch a break this weekend. Every time we pull even, those guys pull ahead. It's almost like we can't get out of our own way, and especially against our Penn, who've been throwing well, and Raiselman have been throwing well. LSU scratches a run back to get it to 7-4. You see Gervais come in the 6th, I believe, and he's throwing pretty well, which is very early, but I understand what Coach Johnson's doing. He's got to win this game at all costs, so he's pulling out all the stops. Gervais comes in. His mechanics are all over, but he kind of finds a way to get out of it, and he throws pretty well. Cooper comes in to relieve him, who gives up another run. LSU misses an opportunity in the bottom of the 6th with bases loaded and 2 outs. Ole Miss makes a pitching change. So Cranford's up. They bring in a lefty, and I have no problem with Cranford going after the first pitch, but if you're going to go after the first pitch, you better not be late. You better if you're going to hit it, you better pull that damn thing. Hit the third base coach in the head, pull the thing into the left field bleachers, do something, but you can't be late and pop up to the first baseman right there in that spot. I don't mind the aggressiveness, but, man, if you're going to be aggressive, be on time. Because if anything, if you're not sure you're going to be late, just let it go. But pop up to the first baseman, Elko, I believe, and that ends the threat. Bases loaded with 2 outs. McManus hits a solo home run, and that's really it for LSU. They don't really score much after that at all. LSU, Ole Miss brings in their closer, and he slams the door. LSU loses the game 8-5, and they get swept. So not a good feeling if you're watching that game or you're walking out the park, or if you're a player or anybody connected with the program. You're basically shaking your head, and you're like, what the hell just happened? To get swept, but nonetheless get swept on our own field, and to get swept on senior weekend and senior day does not leave a good taste in your mouth. Okay, so what are some of the gold-plated money stats from the weekend? Here we go. Just a complete contradiction to what happened last weekend in Alabama, really. So LSU scored 9 runs on the weekend, and 7 came by way of the home run. So 78% of the runs LSU scored were by way of the long ball. We mentioned it before in previous pods, but to me, this is just not a long-term recipe for success. This is not gorilla ball. They're not going to hit 188 home runs on the team. They don't have Brandon Larson, who's going to hit 40. They're not even Tennessee, where they're going to hit 125 or whatever they're going to hit. But if you live and die by the home run with this team, to me, you're going to end up dying. You're going to die on that hill. They have to figure out a way to string more hits together. So 78% of the runs came by way of home run. And we all know Ole Miss had a lot of home runs this weekend. So on the flip side, Ole Miss scored 11 of their 24 runs this weekend by way of the bomb. So that was only 46%. So they hit a lot, and they scored a lot of runs by way of home run. But they also found ways to string hits together to get 2-out hits, and just something LSU was not able to accomplish this weekend. So LSU was outstanding last week, getting big hits and scoring runs with 2 outs. In fact, 66% of the runs they scored versus Alabama came with 2 outs. But this weekend, nada, goose egg, 0. LSU did not score 1 run with 2 outs. Just a rough weekend all around for the Bats. On the other hand, Ole Miss scored 54% of their runs with 2 outs. So LSU's pitchers just couldn't make a pitch, or we couldn't make a play to get out of the inning with 2 outs. And the last 2 gold-plated money stats of the weekend, LSU struck out 43% of the time this weekend. And that was the exact same figure that they struck out last weekend versus Alabama, to a T. So back-to-back weekends, striking out 35 times. And finally, LSU hit a cool 200 on the weekend as a team. So easy math for your boy right here. 20 hits and 100 at-bats. That's not going to get it done against anybody. I don't care if you play in the SWAC, Division II, Division III, NAIA, Pac-12, Group of 5, Sun Belt, Fun Belt, whatever. You hit 200 on the weekend, unless your pitchers are throwing up absolute zeros, it's not going to get it done. So a rough weekend at the plate for the Tigers. Whew. All right, get right, stay right list. I think on the preview pod I said get right, feel right. I don't know if anybody caught that. I re-listened to it, and I was like, what am I talking about? All right, get right, stay right list. How did I do? Not a good weekend for your boy here. Lots of misses. So on the get right, I had Hilliard. And we've discussed how the last two starts have been not typical. Mikhail Hilliard, not what we were used to expecting from the Friday night guy. And he's really struggled with putting hitters away and driving up his pitch count. And this week was no different. I believe before the rains came and the game got suspended, he had 60 pitches through 3 innings. So once again, he was well on his way to driving up his pitch count as he's done the previous 2 weekends. And we've talked about his struggles with commanding the fastball. No need to rehash that. So to me, that was a miss. Mikhail Hilliard did not get right. I also had K. Doty on the weekend, and he definitely did not get right. So once again, a miss by myself. So he continues to really struggle. And LSU has to have him moving forward in some form or fashion, especially with the unknown of the Jacob Berry injury with regards to, we don't know if he's going to be back this weekend for Vandy, if they're just going to hold him out for Vandy in the SEC tournament and have him ready to roll for the regional. But K. Doty was 0 for 11, a big goose egg this weekend. So in the last 11 games, Doty is hitting 7 for 46. I'll do the math for you. That's 152. I mean, we even saw him try and drag bunt with a runner on first and 1 out today. So to me, and he was unsuccessful. He bunted it right back to the pitcher. But I don't know if that's just a way to try to get himself going or that came from the coach or what he was thinking. But, I mean, when you're in a 4-hole, I don't want to see you drag bunting with a man on first. Just take your chances, right? But hitting 152 in his last 11 games, that's just not going to get it done at all. And I was there on Saturday, as I mentioned, and to me, he was just out in front of everything. He hit into a couple ground ball double plays, I believe, and he just didn't have good swings on the pitches. And it's tough to see when you're in a stadium as opposed to on TV where those pitches are. But you could just tell he didn't barrel anything up on Saturday. Everything he hit was capped. So Doty, a miss. He did not get right this weekend. Stay right. Remember, I had 2 hitters on the list for stay right. I had Dugas and I had McManus. So Dugas only played in the Friday and Saturday games, as he was in the starting lineup, as I mentioned, for Sunday, but he ran into the wall in the first inning, so he didn't even get an AB. So we just hope he's okay moving forward. I have not heard if he's injured or that was just precautionary. But on Friday, Dugas went 0 for 4 with 3 Ks, so not great. But he came back strong on Saturday. In Game 2, he went 3 for 5 with a double, and he had 3 of the 5 hits for the team. So basically him and Morgan were the only people that had hits for LSU in the Saturday game. But due to him not playing on Sunday, even though he was in the lineup, I'm going to call it a push. He didn't get right. He didn't stay right. He didn't do anything. He went 3 for 9 on the weekend, which isn't bad, but I feel like didn't have a full book of him hitting this weekend, so we're going to call it a push for Dugas. McManus was the other hitter I had on the stay right list, and I'm going to call this a miss. He was 2 for 10 on the weekend with a solo home run and a couple of Ks, and just wasn't consistent all weekend. The other guy I had on the stay right list was Jacob Hasty, and he's been throwing great as a lefty out the pen, the long middle relief lefty out of the pen, taking some pressure off of Cooper down there, and I thought he threw pretty well. And he was basically the starter for the Sunday game with Dutton only throwing 1 pitch. He gave up a couple runs, which we hadn't seen yet from him, but he did settle down and allow LSU to get back in the game and tie it. So he left the game. It was 3-3 after 4 complete. So I'm going to call that a win. He did his job. He settled down. He kept Ole Miss at bay. He gave up 3 runs in the first and the second, but then he threw 2 zeros up back after that. And I'm going to call this a win. So I'm going to say Hasty stayed right. So overall, I did not do good on the get right, stay right list for the Tigers this weekend. I missed on Hilliard and Doty. Dugas was a push. I missed on McManus, but I got Hasty right. So, starting to wrap this thing up here. What are the 3 big things we learned from this weekend? Now, I went back and forth on this. I wrote down a ton of notes. I was pretty emotional when I wrote down the notes, but I'm recording this several hours later, so I've had a chance to kind of just relax, calm down, step away from the ledge there. So the first thing I learned, LSU's deficiencies were on full display this weekend for everybody to see. You know, they didn't play well in one phase of the game. They didn't pitch it good. They didn't hit it good, and they definitely didn't play defense well. And they were bad this weekend, and Ole Miss is definitely trending up. I believe they've won 7 games in a row for them, 6 in a row in the SEC, with a win against nationally ranked Southern Miss on Wednesday this past week. But back to LSU, it seems like the things we've discussed on the pod that have given me concern, they really reared their ugly head this weekend. But in the end, I do not think LSU is as bad as they played this weekend. I think this is kind of LSU at their worst. And it almost reverted back to early season LSU, and you really hadn't seen that. But this weekend was bad. And I just don't think LSU really has enough firepower in one area, whether it be pitching or hitting, to overcome bad games versus a quality opponent. So they can't have a game where they have, bad pitching and bad defense because they just don't hit well enough throughout the lineup, to me, to where they can really overcome that. I just don't see them winning a 12-10 type of ball game. And the lack of a game 2 or 3 starting pitching continues to rear its head, putting more stress on the bullpen. And LSU can hit home runs. We all know that. But, can they click as a lineup throughout the entire lineup? And it's happened this year, but it's been rare. And I just don't think they string together enough good ABs throughout the games or throughout the weekend. And unfortunately, I think that may come back to haunt them come regional time. So the first thing was LSU's deficiencies were on full display, but I don't think they're as bad as they really showed this weekend. And plus, some of it had to do with Ole Miss, right? Ole Miss is on absolute fire right now. Remember, they were ranked number 1 in the country for a while, and they're starting to play like that. And also upon that point, if you go back to my keys to the weekend for the preview pod, it was to win on Friday, and they had their chances, but DeLucia was just too good. One bad inning really killed LSU. But the other thing, though, they did really well. Even though they had a lot of deficiencies this weekend, they didn't play great. They didn't let the big 4 of Ole Miss really beat them. Now, those guys kind of showed up at inopportune times and had some good at-bats, but if you look at Bench, Gonzalez, Elko, and Alderman, none of those guys had over 3 hits all weekend. But the guy that kind of killed you was Graham. And Graham went off this weekend. But, Elko and Alderman and Bench, they all had their moments, right? They all hit home runs at inopportune times, but they didn't go nuts. They went like 3 for 13 or 2 for 13, but those 2 hits may have been 2 solo bombs. So they all showed up just in different ways. So, all right, what's the second thing I learned this weekend? In the absence of Jacob Berry and possibly Gavin Dugas, somebody or some people have to step up the rest of the year. Bottom line. It can't always just be Cruz and Pearson or Cruz and Morgan or Cruz and McManus at times or Pearson McManus. You got to imagine Pearson and Cruz are going to stay pretty consistent. They've showed that. But LSU needs Doty to figure it out. They need Joe Bear to try to figure it out. His batting average is absolutely plummeting. Thompson shows flashes. Stevenson is scuffling right now. And I don't know who's going to play third moving forward. And if it's Cranford, we all know he's not in there for his offense, even though he did have a triple today. So one person can't replace Jacob Berry, in my opinion, so it has to be a group effort. Or you're just going to see Cruz get pitched around. And LSU struggles to manufacture runs anyway, as we discussed, with their reliance on the home run. And if you can't manufacture runs via bunting or stealing or hit and running, then it's going to be tough to rely on the home run to score. And I'm just thinking down the road. I'm not necessarily thinking Vanderbilt is first and foremost, but I'm thinking about a regional, whether or not you host or not. At some point, you're going to have to come up against another team's dude. And if you're just relying on the home run and you got 4 or 5 guys in that lineup that are struggling, it's just going to be tough. So the second thing I learned, somebody else has got to step up in the absence of Barry, and it's got to probably be several people. And it don't have to be all the time. It just has to be more consistent to what it is now. And the third thing I learned from the weekend, I'm concerned about LSU moving forward. Now, I'm not in full panic mode, and the sky is not falling yet. And maybe this weekend is just a one-off. But for this to happen at home on senior weekend with so much at stake, LSU had everything to play for. You know, people almost penciled them in as a regional host, and some people were talking about how they finished these last two series as a possible top 8 national seed. But for them to not rise up to this challenge or even offer up a fight in a couple of innings or a couple of games, to me, is very troubling. And you look ahead to Vanderbilt, who just took the series from Arkansas, and that's going to be a very tough series. And I know that this team, LSU, plays better on the road, and I haven't dug into Vanderbilt yet, but I just, even at the beginning, when I started doing this podcast, I didn't like that series to end up the year. And to me, it's even more troublesome. So if you had to ask me today, and you say, Chris, you have to give an answer, I don't think LSU will host a regional at this moment. But look, maybe Barry comes back for the SEC tournament. Maybe Dugas is good to go. And maybe you find a Game 2 starter and Hilliard finds his mojo and he gets back in that groove again. But to me, it's all a maybe right now. Look, let's play this out. If they drop 2 out of 3 to Vanderbilt, they're 15-15 going to the SEC tournament. And that means they would have lost their last 5 of 6 SEC games, and I'm sure their RPI would just continue to plummet. So if you're 15-15 going into the SEC tournament, you're going to have to make a very deep run, possibly win it, just to host a regional, in my opinion. Now, I'm not a big numbers guy, and I don't know what other teams are doing. I just don't really pay attention to them. But if you don't make a deep run, then you're going to look at being a 2 seed at some ACC school, probably Virginia Tech or Miami or Louisville or Oklahoma State. And I think everybody would rather have regional at the box as opposed to traveling. So to me, this team needs to take a long look in the mirror and say, look, that's not us. I don't know what the hell happened this past weekend, but we need to flush it and move forward. And they just got to get in that bunker or that foxhole mentality, to me, where it's them against the world, play with a huge chip on their shoulder. You know, you hear a lot of times in football, you play with that dog mentality. I think you can play like that in baseball. And just think it's just them against the world right now. Look, school's over. It's just baseball for these guys. They're going to spend a lot of time around each other. At least I hope they do. And have a team meeting, get together and say, look, Ole Miss has passed us. Let's move forward, and let's do some damage in Vanderbilt. And let's show everybody LSU's still here, and they can't forget about us. So as fans and media personalities and whoever, you're going to see what LSU's made of real quick. Tuesday, let's talk about what they have lying ahead. Tuesday, they play Northwestern State. I'm sure they'll roll over those guys. And then the last SEC series of the year, LSU travels to Nashville to take on Vanderbilt. And everybody in the SEC plays Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because then they have the SEC tournament. I believe it starts Tuesday. If you're not a top 4 seed, I believe you play a single elimination game on Tuesday to get into the double elimination format starting on Wednesday. So LSU still has a lot to play for. They still have everything. They still control their own destiny, in my opinion. But, the last thing I learned was I am a little bit concerned moving forward. So not time to push a panic button, not yet. But it's not time to say, oh, they'll be okay. Like, you got to address some issues. And you got to have those talks in a team meeting and say, look, we're just going to get ready to roll these last couple weekends. And us against the world, baby. So that'll do it for this week's Ole Miss vs. LSU series review on the 60 feet 6 inches LSU pod. Please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, like, comment, and hit that notifications bell. Make sure to check out the podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, and other audio platforms. And be sure to follow and interact with me on the Twitter account. The Twitter is at 60ft6in LSU pod. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to the review pod. And quick turnaround as LSU travels to Vanderbilt. So can't wait to dig into Vanderbilt. And I will see y'all on the LSU versus Vanderbilt 60 feet 6 inches LSU pod preview. Until then, y'all stay safe. Thanks for supporting the pod. I appreciate y'all. Take care.